Wood. I have a PhD actually in history, and I am the founder and CEO of Beyond the Professoriate. We're actually now called the Center for Graduate Career Success, and we do a variety of different training platforms and programmings to support graduate students and postdocs in pursuing meaningful careers after their PhD or postdoc program. So today, what I want to do, I do want to talk a little bit about our career training platform, but I first want to start talking about, why we do what we do here at Beyond the Professoriate. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges PhDs and postdocs face when they think about building careers after their degree or program. And then next, I want to talk about how we actually make an informed career decision. So in the PhD career training platform, we have resources to support you applying for academic faculty positions, as well as professional or non-academic jobs. We've been doing a survey of people that have been using the platform, and it's interesting because about 50% of learners on the platform are saying that they're open to both career options. And so we really want to talk about how do you, if you're open to both career options, how do you then make an informed career decision, and giving you some steps and strategies. Then we'll talk briefly about the stages of preparing for an academic job search. We actually have a 4-step process. I know this is about preparing for faculty careers. I certainly went on the academic job market when I finished my PhD. That was the primary thing that I wanted to do. I actually graduated into the Great Recession, the first one. I don't know what this one's going to be called, the one that we're currently in. And it really changed the direction of my life, right? That there just were not the academic jobs at the end of my program that there were when I started my PhD program. And so now I'm here running a business, doing all kinds of different things after a PhD in history. And so really, I think there's a lot to say about having being open to career options. Even for those of you that are very interested in an academic job search, it can actually just give you confidence, right? That you can go on the academic job market, and if the job you want isn't there, if it doesn't align with who you are as a person, if you really don't want to live in that particular town or that particular region, you'll have the confidence to walk away from an academic job that's not right for you, because you'll know that you have other options that are open to you. And it'll just fill you with confidence instead of dread. I think too often we go on the academic job market kind of white knuckling it, just stress that if it doesn't work out, we won't be happy, we won't find fulfilling work. And knowing that that's not true can actually just set you up to be a much more confident job seeker, first on the faculty job market, and then potentially afterwards. The other thing that happens too is we hear from faculty all of the time who've had 5-10 years of career success in academia, but then they're over it, right? They've published their book, they've taught their courses, and they're looking to think about other career options. And in today's creative economy, people change jobs every 3 to 5 years outside of the professoriate. And we're starting to see, I think, more people moving in and out of academia. And so again, knowing what your career options are will allow you to think critically about a faculty job. Maybe it's good for 5 years, maybe it's good for 10 years, but you will know that there's other things you want to do. In a survey that we've conducted of about 6,000 PhDs now, 53% tell us that they're worried actually that work and life will have less meaning outside of academia. They're unsure about how to find a meaningful non-academic career. And then 56% worry that they're not actually going to be intellectually engaged in a non-academic career. 91% are feeling like they're unable to communicate their value to employers. And here's some things that people have shared back to us over the last couple of years. In thinking about a non-academic job, this person says, I really want to preserve my passion, creativity, curiosity, and drive. And so what I really like about this quote, this concern this person have, is that they're actually very clear on their values, right? Their creativity, their curiosity, and their drive are important workplace values. And what I like about this is that even though this person doesn't actually realize it, they're already setting themselves up with a metric to evaluate non-academic career opportunities. They want to find a place where they can be creative, curious, and drive. Some people are worried that their advisors will not be supportive if they leave academia. We know that's a huge challenge for PhDs and postdocs. Other people are really worried about finding employment, right? About being able to pay bills and paying off their student loans once they leave and get a job. This PhD career training platform then is actually designed to help you move through your job search with purpose and strategy, and really help you overcome some of these concerns that you have. And what I always like to say is, like, the things that are keeping you up at night, those doubts that you shared with us, those are all research questions, right? So really, when you're beginning your career exploration, if you can take some of the concerns you have, like freaking out about the recession, and turn it into a research question. So for example, like what are growth fields? What are growth industries? Where are people going to continue to hire? Like those become research questions that you can begin to dive into. Geographically, feeling trapped geographically. Okay, if you don't want to move anywhere, what are some of the career options that you have available to you in the city and town where you want to live, where you can maintain your creativity and your drive? So rather than sitting with the worry, flipping the worry into a question that you can actually apply your skills as a researcher and a scholar in order to find those answers. And that's really what we want to help you do through our curriculum and program and the platform. So if you've not checked it out before, we have a lot of resources to help you answer that daunting question of what can I actually do with my PhD? We want to help you leverage your education into a new career pathway and gain confidence in your skills. We have a step-by-step process for both faculty as well as professional jobs, and I want to talk a little bit about those here in a minute. And we also have a lot of resources to help you overcome that fear of career change, were you to need to step out of the academy and move into a non-academic job. And we also want you to gain the skills, strategies, and resources that you need to pursue any career path. So again, it's a holistic career training platform, it's all self-paced courses, video lessons, workbooks. We also do monthly live webinars on specific topics. I think next month, Harry Thomas is going to be talking about how to prepare for an online interview for a teaching portfolio. So we do those, or for a faculty job. So you can look for those kinds of events in the platform as well. So what can I do with my PhD? What are some of the options that you have available to you, and will you be happy? That's a big question. So what we have learned from our research over the last couple of years is that PhDs want employment that is intellectually engaging and stimulating, that is meaningful and makes a difference, and allows for the expression of important values. Those are really important aspects for PhDs. And what we know is that the meaningful work and fulfilling work can be found, of course, in academia, but also in the professional workspace. So if we go back to this, right, this is actually what we're looking for. When we think about our career options, or what often drives us to academia, is that we're looking for work that is intellectually engaging and stimulating. We want to make an impact, and we want to have the freedom of expression of our important values. And those are the core tenets of satisfying careers for PhDs. But what you'll learn through the curriculum and programming is that, yes, there is, of course, that opportunity in academia for some people. Not everyone's going to actually be happy in academia, and that's one of the things we want you to really evaluate. And then also thinking about your professional workforce options as well. All right, so we want to think about how you actually prepare for an academic job search and what can you expect. So right now, we've got lessons that align with our curriculum. And this will become a little bit more obvious here by the end of November as we update the curriculum. But we really want you to think through your job search always as within a framework or with steps, because oftentimes when you think about applying for faculty jobs, what you actually want to do is you start like writing your CV or your cover letter, but really what you need to do is actually evaluate at the very beginning of a faculty job search and make sure that it's actually the right fit for you, and evaluate your readiness to go on the academic job market. So some of you are talking about being ABD, and looking at going on the academic job market, and so what you really want to evaluate is, when does it make sense for someone in your program to actually hit the job market? Because if you are interviewing on campus next term, you want to have probably most of your dissertation done by the end of December, because you're not going to have a lot of time to be writing a dissertation if you're actually doing preparing for campus interviews. So there's an evaluation process, right? Again, you also want to evaluate your readiness to go on the academic job market in terms of how many publications are expected of somebody out of your field. Do you actually need to do a postdoc in order to be competitive for a job? So these these questions that you need to ask at the evaluation stage are very important to helping you set to being successful in applying for academic jobs. So not just going on or defaulting through it. Some of those questions that people brought in, especially the geography question, I think that's so important, because we really feel like we're supposed to just go. I always joke that that academics are like Jesuits in the 14th or 15th century, where they're supposed to go wherever Jesus calls, and they go out on the frontier and they set up missions, and they're not allowed to ask questions about where they end up, if it's in New Mexico or, anyways, that's always my image. And that's actually not required of you in order to have a meaningful, fulfilling job. It might be required of you to stay in academia, but again, is that the most important aspect of a career for you? And the evaluation stage is an opportunity for you to get very clear on what's most important to you, and then be able to assess whether or not an academic position is actually going to be fulfilling. So coming in the next couple of weeks, you'll see some new lessons and workbooks, but really, we want you to do informational interviews with faculty, people who come out of your program, alumni who are now working in different kinds of academic positions, and talk to them about what it's like. Ask them about, what is the day-to-day like of a faculty member who's teaching a 4-4 teaching load, and what do they like about their college town, and what do they not like about it? And gathering that information can help you make an informed career decision, because going on the academic job market is a huge, enormous investment of time and energy. From there, then of course you go to the apply stage, where you're going to be writing effective documents for your faculty application. And then you want to think about, breaking the application process actually up into 2 steps. So there's the applied stage, where you're writing your documents and you're submitting them. But then there's your demonstration of your knowledge and expertise as a future faculty member. And that comes in the interview and presentation stage. And I think it's really important that you thinking of it here as demonstrating your knowledge, demonstrating your expertise. And then we've actually added pivot into the faculty job market, because at the end of the day, you want to determine whether or not you're going to take whatever was offered to you, or if you're actually going to make a career pivot. So a story that I often don't tell is, I was on the academic job market and I got offered a teaching intensive position in northern Alberta. My family is in Alberta, but it is cold in Edmonton. Edmonton is a very cold, snowy city. And I went on this, it was the only on-campus interview I ever got. And I went to it, and the faculty hated each other. There was all sorts of infighting that they told me about while I was interviewing for the position. They had nothing but contempt for their students. They were like, and so I went to the airport after this interview, and I called my undergraduate mentor, Jim Tagg, and I told him about this interview, and he said, "Marin, you cannot take that job. You'll end up with a drinking problem, and booze is expensive in Canada, so you can't take that job." And I was offered the job, and the starting salary was $85,000 Canadian a year, which is actually decent money. And I turned it down, and I didn't get another one, and I have no regrets about that. But it was the ability to then pivot that became really important to the exit out of academia. I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't sad, or that it wasn't difficult, or that it wasn't a difficult decision to walk away from an academic career. But it's really important that you're able to make that pivot and do that evaluation, so that if you are offered a position where you will end up with a drinking problem, you are able to turn that down and come up with other things to do with your life. And I had the right support in my community to make that pivot. All right, so evaluate. Is this the right career fit for me? We often, as PhDs, just make that assumption, right? And I think the really challenging thing is that because we're at R1 institutions, we don't always have a clear sense of what it's actually like to be faculty at most kinds of institutions, right? Institutions that are not as well funded as Penn, that are not necessarily in cities that we want to live in, like Philadelphia. And so you really want to think about the sacrifices that will be asked of you to pursue an academic career, and determine whether those are the sacrifices you're prepared to make, and really investigate that before you sink that time and energy into it. And again, the other question is, am I actually ready to go on the academic job market in my specific discipline or field? So, resources, of course, you have Diane and Joseph. If you're, depending on your relationship with your PI, you can have the conversations about readiness to go on the academic job market, but certainly asking people who are a little bit senior to you in your program or in your lab, as well as reaching out to alumni who've recently gone on the academic job market, can help you actually evaluate your timeline and possibilities. And then, of course, this is what you've just been working on, but there are resources in the platform to help you write your CV, your cover letter, your teaching statement and portfolio, your diversity statement, which is a very fraught document. Poor Harry Thomas has been working on updating our diversity statement. That's a difficult one to do well. as well as a research statement. And of course, you have Diane and Joseph that are able to help you, but what we really want you to be able to do is watch the video lessons and the work and complete the workbooks and exercises in the apply stage, so that then when you have those conversations with Joseph and Diane, you're able to maximize those conversations. You've gone through, you've written your teaching statement to the best of your abilities, and now you're able to go and just get that extra feedback that you need in order to be extra competitive. So really maximizing the time that you have with your career center staff as well as your faculty. So that's the way we see our resources helping you. Go in there, watch those videos, do the lessons, and then set up your appointments with Joseph and Diane. We also have, for the demonstration stage, we have the interviewing and presentation process. So first round interviews, on campus interviews, your teaching demonstration, your job talk, and how to negotiate a job offer as well. Where you should start really is this fantastic webinar that is in the platform called How to Decide When to Go on the Academic Job Market. It was a guest presentation by Laura Lohman, and it's really fantastic. She walks you through the entire timeline, the amount of energy that it takes, the kinds of questions you should ask, and the kind of time commitment on-campus interviews require of candidates. So I really highly recommend that resource. Once you've actually thought about and evaluated your academic job market, maybe you've gone on, or maybe you're unsure, what we really want you to what we really want you to do is think about this question: will you be happy in the work that you're doing? And so we have resources, especially for the professional career side, to help you identify career opportunities that will align with who you are as a person. So again, the academic job is just one space where you might be successful. It's certainly not the only space where you're going to be successful. So what we really want to help you do in evaluating professional career pathways is to help you think about what work you will actually find intellectually engaging and rewarding. And one of the things that we see doctoral students and postdocs make, or mistake they make, is that we're often job searching based on bias instead of research. So for example, people have terrible assumptions about, I can't work for a for-profit company. I can only, because everyone is just interested in money, I can only work at a nonprofit. So technically, I'm going to use this example because I'm an advisor for the ETS Global Higher Education Committee. ETS, which does the GREs, is $1 billion. They have $1 billion revenue every single year, even though technically it's a nonprofit, and they write assessments. That might be something you're really excited about. Beyond Prof is we don't make anywhere near that, and I'll let you know if we ever hit a profit. But we're a very mission-driven organization, right? We're a small group of PhDs. We're very passionate about the work we're doing. We're very nimble, and so even though you wouldn't assume that of a for-profit company, we're very, very much values-driven organization. And so you really want to not make assumptions based on the tax status of an organization. I always joke that the NRA is also a nonprofit, but it certainly doesn't get any of my money, and I don't necessarily think it does great good in the world. Those are my politics. But my local distillery, which is a for-profit company, gets all of my money because I heavily support my local drinking establishments. So you want to think again about who do you want to work alongside? Will you find the work intellectually engaging and rewarding? And ask questions instead of job searching based on bias. Will you be energized and motivated by your work? That's a really important question. And a company culture, right? That's very important. Big organizations are very different from small organizations. Small organizations and a startup space operate very differently than the Penn Career Center, right? Like Joseph and I in some ways have the same job in building curriculum and working and advising and mentoring students. But in the day-to-day, it looks very different. He's at Penn, which has bureaucracy, and I am the bureaucracy. So I get to make very quick pivot decisions. And there's positives and negatives to all of that. So Joseph probably has better benefits because he's in a larger organization. I have no benefits because I'm running my own company. So there's payoffs, right, that you want to evaluate when you're looking at company culture: size of an organization, the deliverables, the work. What is it that people do? Who is working there? What gets them up? What drives them? And again, not job searching based on bias, but job searching based on curiosity, really bringing your curiosity to the job search process. So when I talk about bias, this is some of the biases that we see. We see PhDs when they're approaching their non-academic job search, worried that they're going to be bored. We hear this all the time, right? I'm going to just sell out. It's going to be boring. I'm not going to actually really like my colleagues. My work won't have the same impact as it will in academia. That's a big concern. I will not find meaningful work at a for-profit company. The other thing I want to say on this, because this is a big pet peeve of mine, and the reason why it's a big pet peeve of mine is that only 1 in 10 jobs in the private sector are at a nonprofit. So if you've decided that you can't work at a for-profit company, you're missing out on 90% of the opportunities you could potentially pursue. And you're also just missing 90% of professionals who probably do actually share your politics and your work ethic and your sense of values, who are working at for-profit companies. Most people are working in technically for-profit companies. And so you really want to think about, why are they working there and what are they doing? The other thing that I always think about is nonprofits and for-profits exist to solve problems. Because if you're not solving a problem, then you don't have a place in the market, right? Whether or not it's literacy, you could be doing literacy in a nonprofit, or you could be at an ed tech company working on literacy. But there's a problem that both of those organizations have identified, and they're working towards finding solutions for those. So nonprofits and for-profits exist to solve problems, and you want to think about whether or not the problem they're solving is something that you're passionate about, and whether or not the people that you work with are the people you want to work with. And I'm selling out is always a big concern, especially for humanities and social science PhDs. We very much worry about selling out. We like the culture of academia, which I think implicitly makes us feel like we're doing good because we're involved in education, although that may or may not be true. So inside the PhD platform, you are going to find, I think, about 150 interviews now. Bronwyn, our new team member, has been actively adding new interviews this year of PhDs who've actually successfully leveraged their education into a meaningful career. Government, nonprofit, for-profit, higher education administration, you have all of those interviews. You can search and sort them based on academic discipline. And we don't break them down too specific, because one of the big things that you'll learn in our curriculum is that it's really the collection of your skills and not so much your subject matter expertise that becomes important to your non-academic career. And so humanities PhDs, English, philosophy, history have very similar skill sets. Social science PhDs, sociology, anthropology, psychology have very similar skill sets. STEM have very similar skill sets. And so it doesn't necessarily matter if the person has a sociology PhD, they can go work in social science research or UX research, for example. And so it's a collection of skills. So when you get on the platform, you're not going to find like chemistry, you'll find STEM. And the reason why is chemists and biochemists and ecologists can often go work in data science, for example, which has been a growing field. So you want to think about the collection of your skills and not so much about the specifics of your subject matter expertise. I studied pornography in the 18th century. Doesn't have a direct application in most industries that I would want to work in and tell people about. And so, it's the application of my skills as a communicator, an educator, a scholar, a thinker, a teacher, someone who can do curriculum design and development, public speak. Those are the things that came out of my history PhD program that have allowed me to be successful. And then I've also had to learn a ton of stuff in a hurry. I think Joseph, I don't know if you've updated your LinkedIn profile, but Joseph always has great examples between chickens and career services. And so maybe there is more of a direct correlation for you, Joseph, than there is for me in subject matter expertise. But as you go through the career training platform and you watch these interviews, and this is one of the places that people skip this, like they don't necessarily want to look at the library, they go directly to the lessons, but watching these videos is so important to really understanding how people build careers, how they find places where they're going to thrive, and the kinds of questions you can be asking yourself and others in order to find a space where you're going to thrive. And so if you're hesitant at all, or the question about I don't know how to find a career that's in science and industry, well, go listen to those stories of how people have actually found those careers, those scientific careers in industry, and then begin to utilize those same strategies in your own job search. We've also taken some of our more recent interviews and we've turned them into a podcast, so you don't necessarily have to sit and watch them anymore. So you can go ahead, you can find the link to the podcast on the homepage there, and just listen to these a little bit on the go. And we've also added transcripts there, so if you just want to skim and read some stories of PhDs who've gone into career transition, you can do that as well. I like the interviews because you get to see the person and their passion, but that's an option for you as well. So Jennifer Burnett, she says, I get to be creative and be innovative and change the way of thinking in her organization. And you might think that maybe she works in tech, but she actually works in the government, right? And so if you have assumptions that maybe government work isn't going to be creative or be innovative, talking to people who work there can actually maybe change or shift the way that you think about that particular career pathway. I'm really surprised about how dynamic medical writing is. So maybe you think medical writing is kind of boring, but in this interview, you learn all about the different kinds of documents and the different kinds of things that Dr. Das is doing in his job as a medical writer. So again, one of the things we do when we ask these questions, these interviews with people, is we ask them what they do on a day-to-day basis. What is medical writing? So if you have questions about like these different career pathways that you've heard about, you probably will find some interviews where you can learn a little bit more about what people are doing, and hopefully it'll spark your imagination about what you can do. Like humanities PhDs, they need marketers, and you'll probably think I can't do marketing. Like marketing is awful with sales. It's actually a really super fascinating field about how do you create partnerships with people, right? How do you actually get someone to know that there's a resource available to them at the University of Pennsylvania that can help them with their job search? And that's the marketing question. How do you actually do that? And so there's a lot of really great opportunities out there that maybe you have dismissed or haven't thought about, that where you can really thrive and have really successful careers. Jane has a PhD in history and she works in nonprofits. And one of the things that we hear time and time again from PhDs is how valued they feel as professionals in their non-academic careers. And I think it maybe is a little bit striking to how we feel as PhDs, doctoral students and postdocs. We maybe don't feel very valued in our professional lives. Academia can be very critical, very intense. Reviewer number 2 is a real thing. You know, we don't have reviewer number 2s at Beyond Prof. We have Diane Sapikishi, who edits all my work, but she's not reviewer number 2, right? So you live in a space where people really value you. And one of the big things that happens when you leave academia is that you end up in career fields where they're, especially right now, like, yes, we're looking at a recession, but the labor market is still very, very strong. And that means that companies are looking for talent and they want to keep you, because you can leave, right? Like, I know that my team members can go get other jobs, and I live in fear of that because I love each of them and they are such critical parts of my organization. And so as a company founder and owner, like, anytime I can give them raises, I give them raises. Anytime I can find ways to give them benefits, I give them benefits. They want time off, they can have time off. They want to have vacations, they can have vacations. Because I want my team to be happy. I want them to be healthy. I want them to have work-life balance, because I want them to want to come to work at Beyond the Professoriate every day, because as soon as they don't, they can go get other jobs. And so when you move into these non-academic careers where there's a lot of opportunity and growth, you'll find that your employer will probably treat you quite well. And if they don't, you can go get a job somewhere else because you have career security. You don't have job security, right? You don't have a job for life, but you're working in a space where your skills mean that you will have work for life. And so you move from job security to career security. And that's a really important mental shift. But that career security means that both you and the employer know that you are valuable and that you can go work somewhere else. And it's not something I thought about when I started a business, where you're like, wow, I'm really beholden to these people, and if they leave, I'm going to sweat buckets. Okay, so how do you actually go about conducting a non-academic job search? So to start your non-academic job search, you need to identify options that are open to you. And so what we have developed for you is what we call your optimal career pathway. There's variations of this that exist on the internet. But for PhDs, I think really you need to think about what motivates you in your work. Not like, I love history, but what I like is stories. I like to think about the way in which we create stories and use stories in order to navigate our lives. That's actually very interesting to me. So that's what I studied. I studied cheap print and pornography. I looked at representations of gender and sexuality, and I looked at ways in which, stories that were being told in the press then actually circulated within court documents, the way in which people were actually utilizing narratives across society to navigate their own and understand their own sexual lives. Now I do stories differently, right? What are the stories we tell about ourselves when we apply for jobs? What are the stories people tell themselves that keep them back from being successful? Where do we hear this repetition of these stories? Or in terms of marketing, right? How do I tell a compelling story that gets somebody to like log in and utilize this resource? So it's actually my interest in stories that permeates my work. And it has nothing to do with whether the stories were told in the past, the present, or the future. That's actually what's really motivating me, and making sure that I'm empowering people to live better lives, right? As an educator, that was something that's really important to me. Now in this organization, I have the opportunity to create a multi-generational effect. I help you get a better job. You're able to then, if you have a partner or if you have children, then you have a better life with those people. You're happier, you're healthier. And so that really motivates me in my work. And again, it doesn't have to be in the classroom. It can be done in a variety of different ways. Then you need to think about your marketable skills. In academia, we often don't think about our skills, we think about our subject matter expertise. And so we have a lot of resources in the platform to help you really identify what's marketable about you. Storytelling, writing, communicating, these are really important skill sets. Being able to do project management, think creatively, take initiative, those are really important skills that PhDs have. And then thinking about what the world will pay you money to do. So as an example, as a historian, yes, I could do archival research, but there was no job that was going to pay me money to do archival research. And I actually hated archival research. I thought it was actually incredibly boring. So that's an example of a skill I had that didn't motivate me, and the world wasn't actually going to pay me money to do it. So even though that's a skill that people would be like, oh, well, you're a history PhD, why don't you go do, heritage management? I was like, oh, it sounds absolutely terrible and it pays poorly, and I'd have to spend all my time in the archives. So this is very unique and specific to you. And again, we want you to take our courses to find this fit for you. But just because somebody in your PhD program has gone down a certain pathway doesn't mean it's the right pathway for you. So if you have access to placement data about where PhDs are working outside of the academy, use it as a guide, but it doesn't lock you in. And certainly it's not going to be your subject matter expertise that necessarily opens your next door. It's your motivations, it's your skills, and what the world will pay you money to do. So some questions I want you to ask yourselves, and again, we ask you these questions in Know Your Options, which is the first course in the Professional Careers Program of Study. Rather than asking, what can I do with my PhD, which is actually the title of this presentation, we want you to ask yourself a different question. Why did you actually pursue your PhD in the first place, right? Because your degree is actually a manifestation of your interests, your values, and your motivators. It doesn't define what you do next. What energizes you about the work that you're doing now? So again, Know Your Options really helps you think about this. And oftentimes people say, well, I love teaching, or I love history, or I love chickens. And it's like, okay, great. But what about that actually is interesting to you, right? We need to get past the specifics and think much more, a little bit higher level about our values and our motivators. So here's some other questions, again, that we ask you and Know Your Options. When you think about your teaching, is it actually empowering others, sharing your knowledge and mentoring and advising others? When you think about your research, is what motivates you actually the process of discovery? Or is it applying data to solve problems? Is it, your subject matter expertise? What actually is it about frogs or history or whatever that actually gets you excited and interested? And what are the qualities of academia that you value or don't value? Because that's a really important piece as well, right? Like, what is it about academia that you never want to replicate again in your life, right? That's important as well. Reviewer number 2 is a great example. The reason why this exercise is so important is because based on what actually is motivating you, you will pursue different career pathways. So if you just stay stuck here with teaching and you don't get to knowledge transfer, right? Well, knowledge transfer actually could lead to consulting. I like knowledge transfer. I actually don't like curriculum design and development. I do like mentoring and advising people, which makes me a good manager. But if what you want to do is mentor and advise people, maybe you'll pursue something like team agile coaching, which is mentoring and advising. And it's not knowledge transfer, right? But again, it's something that could be really satisfying to you about teaching. And if it's curriculum design and development, maybe you're going to want to pursue a career in instructional design. But knowing what is actually motivating to you about teaching is very important, because it fragments and it begins to allow you to find other careers where you can have similar career satisfaction, right? So knowledge transfer, you're not necessarily going to be satisfied by being an instructional designer. Mentoring and advising, you might not be satisfied in a consulting role. So you want to think very critically about your values, because you have the skills to go in a variety of different places. But whether or not you're going to find that satisfying will really depend on what it is about your teaching, your research, and your work in the lab that actually is motivating and energizing to you as well. Again, what will the world pay you money to do? What skills are in demand by employers? Where have you demonstrated success with these skills? That's very important. Employers want to see the application of skills. So when you're thinking about your time in the lab or in the classroom or in the archives, what skills are you actually applying with success? And what in-demand skills could you build or gain more experience with? And that's a really important thing to ask, especially while you still have, at Penn, you always have alumni support, but you have more access to like on-campus resources, potentially courses, library resources, workshops, those kinds of things that now, while you're a postdoc or a graduate student, that you will lose access to. And so thinking about developing other in-demand skills can be very helpful. So Diane Sepakishi, who works at Beyond Prof, she did some teaching and learning certifications, which allowed her to become an instructional designer while she was pursuing her PhD at York. So success actually happens in 4 stages, and in the platform, you'll find a lesson to help you move through these stages with purpose and strategy. We have the discovery stage, which is this knowing what your values are, your most marketable skills, and then using that at the research stage to evaluate career options that align with who you are as a person. So is it UX research? Is it project management? Is it data science? Is it student affairs? Because at the end of the day, you're going to actually need to choose one of those career fields that you'd like to try next and implement a job search to land an opportunity in that chosen career field. Professional careers are highly specialized. They do have specialized knowledge and training that you will typically need to read yourself into that new career field. You'll also need to build a network, and you can't do that for student affairs and project management and UX research and data science, right? That's too much. So choosing one will allow you to build your knowledge and build a network so that you can implement that job search and be successful in landing an opportunity. The builder stage, which we talk about on the platform, is an opportunity for you to evaluate, did you make the right choice at the implementation stage? It's perfectly fine if you find out that UX research actually isn't what you want to do. It's going to be through experiential learning in outside of the academy that you actually settle into a career pathway that's right for you. So the builder stage is an opportunity for you to continue to look for new opportunities in a non-academic career field. I'm going to skip this. All right, so these are the stages. You can find more resources about them in the platform. And just make sure that as you work through the professional careers program of study, you actually work through it in the way that it's designed, because skipping steps leads to frustration and failure. If you start your job search by trying to write a resume before you know where you're writing your resume to, like, what are you applying for? What are the skills that employer wants? Do you have the skills? How do you talk about your skills in the language of that employer? You will just be frustrated and you will fail in your job search. And we don't want you to do that, because too often PhDs then believe that it's their degree that's holding them back. And it's not your degree that's holding you back. It's the fact that you're not job searching correctly. So if you follow the process that we've laid out for you in the platform, you will be successful in finding a career that is right for you and in landing an opportunity in that career field as well. So start with know your options, and then move to evaluate your opportunities, and then implement your job search. So know your options is really important. It's a short course. It's 5 video lessons. I think it's about 40 pages. We recommend you take about 30 days to actually do the work, do the reflective exercises. Evaluate your opportunities. We recommend that you spend about 60 days researching career pathways so that you have an idea of where you'd like to go next. And if that's all you do because you're going to pursue the faculty career, that's great. Just do know your options and evaluate your opportunities. And then depending on what happens on your academic job market, you can come back to implement your job search at a later point. But know your options and evaluate your opportunities will set you up for that, to be confident on the academic job market, to know that you can get another job that will make you happy and what that other job is, right? So that's a very important piece of being open to where life takes you. And then please make sure that you're watching the video library, because that's also very an important resource.